Hi guys, welcome to the show. My name is Seb Ostrovich, aka the voice of the people, and this is the Weightlifting House podcast.
Hello and welcome to this week's episode of the Weightlifting House podcast. I am your temporary host, normally reserved to secondhand duties, supporting Seb, but he's not able to make it. Instead, I'm taking over lead responsibility, head weightlifting podcast duties, and discussing weightlifting today with Kevin Simons. How's it going, Kevin?
Hey, good, man. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, no problem. And I'm sure, everyone who's clicked on this, clicked on it for a reason, because they know how, successful you've been as a weightlifting coach. And they're interested to obviously dive into the topics we have at hand today, which will be developing youth weightlifters, programming, technique development, kind of your influences, your background, all of that good stuff. Just before we dive into that, I'll just mention a brief bit about Kevin for people who don't know much. So he's obviously the head coach at Alpha Barbell, has competed at the CrossFit Games. He coaches a lot of very, very good weightlifters. I studied kinesiology at Washington State University. I have this mental image of him clean and jerking 170 in my mind, so I just thought I'd mention that as well. Kevin, is there anything I've left out? Anything you feel like people should know about you?
I think that's pretty much my background. Sounds good.
Well, I'm interested to hear. So you were a gymnast, you competed in CrossFit, but how did you specifically get into weightlifting and coaching weightlifting?
Yeah, well, weightlifting's a pretty big part of CrossFit. Mm-hmm. So when I came into CrossFit, I was already pretty strong for a CrossFitter. Back then I was working in pounds, but I could back squat 500 and deadlift 550, and I had all the gymnastic skills, but the hard parts for me were just the cardiovascular endurance and then technique. So I knew if I wanted to be the top of the sport, I was going to have to really focus on weightlifting. But I never had a coach. I was completely self-taught. So my first couple years were in the garage, and I had an old camera because we didn't have smartphones in 2009. And I would just film every set that I'd do. I'd go back and watch it, compare that against videos what the top athletes were doing. And so I kind of taught myself weightlifting. And then I was coaching gymnastics. I started working with Harrison Maurus. He quit gym and wanted to get strong. I found out he was going to get strong really fast. And so he was actually the very first athlete I ever taught to snatch, clean, and jerk. And I had Greg Everett's book open on the table, and we went progression by progression. So I kind of learned how to coach along with him. And then he was very successful, obviously, and realized that I liked coaching weightlifting better than gymnastics. At the time, I had 2 platforms in the back of the gymnastics center. And so after coaching gymnastics for 4 hours, the kids wanted to come back and start with just strength training. And then the kids who kind of had some aptitude, we started learning the lifts. And so I just kind of learned to coach with all those kids that I'd already been coaching gymnastics to.
Yeah, and I guess it would actually make sense to even start, a little bit before you got into weightlifting and CrossFit. How did you end up getting into gymnastics? Was that kind of, the natural progression for most people, I think, is they're really young, their parents sign them up, and then they get into it. When did you start with gymnastics? And how long did it take you to reach, you were a level 10 gymnast, right?
Yeah.
So how long did it take to get to that point?
Well, I started really late in gymnastics. I competed nationally in Taekwondo when I was a kid. So I had a pretty good athletic base from that. But I didn't start gymnastics until I was 12, almost 13, which is generally way too late. Most kids who are going to be successful are starting when they're 4 or 5, and they're putting in 20 plus hours a week that entire time. So I was just fortunate. I had a trampoline when I grew up, and I spent hours every day on the trampoline. So I think my first day in gymnastics coming into it, I could do double back, punch double front, pretty high level skills. It was just backyard gymnastics. It wasn't pretty, but I had a pretty good base from all that stuff. I made it to level 10. I wasn't a great level 10 gymnast. Like I was never going to make a scholarship or anything like that, especially for men's gymnastics. It's so competitive. But I made it to level 10. I had to skip a level almost every year to get there. But there weren't any opportunities outside that. Like I wasn't going to make a scholarship. I wasn't going to walk into a club in college or anything. I was level 10. It was like very watered down skills. I was very clean, but it was just, I didn't have any difficulty really.
Yeah. So when you kind of got to that point, did you start doing CrossFit shortly after you stopped doing gymnastics, or did you find that kind of in between stopping gymnastics and then, right before weightlifting?
Yeah. So I stopped gymnastics when I graduated high school. I've been lifting that entire time in the weight room at school. And I really loved weightlifting. I don't think it helped my gymnastics because the strength training coach at the school was 3 sets of 10 for every exercise. So I blew up. I was 170 pounds, which doesn't sound like that much for a gymnast. I was 35 pounds too heavy. I loved strength training. Pretty much just did a strength training program the first 2 years in college. I graduated high school 2006, and then I think I started doing CrossFit in like 2008, maybe 2009.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then so you ended up going to the CrossFit Games. Like, what was that transition like from, I mean, obviously having such a strength surplus, having, more than adequate gymnastic skills for CrossFit, and then getting into that sport where it's heavily reliant on the two of those qualities. What was the progress like with CrossFit? When did you kind of start hitting a stride and reaching those higher levels?
I mean, the sport of CrossFit it was so much different in 2009. I mean, if you had a 2:15 Fran, like you're at the top of the game, and I did it in sub 2 minutes, 2 months into CrossFit. Wow. So like, if it was really short or it was like really heavy, I was going to do really well. And like anything with high skills, like at the time, like a muscle up was like a high skill in 2009. Like I crushed that stuff. But gymnastics is not going to give you an aerobic base. And so I really struggled with anything longer, anything that really required any cardiovascular fitness. I just wasn't there. And the mentality in 2009 was all about intensity. It's what they taught at the level 1 courses, and that's what everybody was doing. It's like, oh no, you don't want to go long and slow because it's going to eat into your strength gains, and you can get just as much cardio with the high intensity intervals. And that was definitely a mistake. I mean, now if I'm training a CrossFit athlete, we spend a long time in that like level 1, that base building phase with long, easy intervals. But so I got to the games and you're doing 4 workouts a day. And like I was going anaerobic every single workout, hypoxic at the end. And what I didn't know at the time is that without a strong aerobic system, you can't recover between like immediately after workouts and between workouts. So by the end of the weekend, like I was completely wrecked. I mean, I couldn't even clean 70% of my 1RM because I just wasn't recovering. So then I had to spend a long time building that base, actually going back and working on the slow endurance stuff. My resting heart rate when I went to the games in 2012 was 70. Like that's bad for just a sedentary person. Because I spent all this time only doing sprints and only doing high intensity. So like my thought is that the heart walls they were way too thick from the concentric hypertrophy. I didn't spend any time in that like 60% max heart rate to stretch out that left ventricle. So I had like no stroke volume, and I would just, if it was short and fast, I was great. But anything longer, I was just gassing.
Yeah.
So then after that, I spent a lot more time working on the endurance and became a much better athlete just because of that. It's something I think a lot of CrossFit athletes miss. And anybody who's just doing a 1-hour class in the gym, like they're never going to get that if they're not spending time outside of the gym running for an hour or 90 minutes.
Yeah. I'm curious to hear kind of before we get into the weightlifting side of your kind of, competitive career and then coaching, earlier on, it sounded like a lot of what you did was a bit, you know, different from the norm in that you said you got into gymnastics a little later, when you were kind of teaching yourself how to weightlift and how to train, kind of during those CrossFit years. It was very much self-taught. You know, who were some of your influences earlier on that kind of influenced the way you operated and kind of programmed and trained in terms of technical development and all of that stuff?
So Greg Everett was a big influence. I mean, I studied his book front to back, dog-eared most of those pages. I've read a lot from Glenn Penplay, had a lot of the old Russian manuals translated, and those are very helpful. Like the development of youth weightlifters was one of like the seminal texts on how I program and teach youth athletes. So those, I mean, like my YouTube feed is just weightlifting. I'm always watching your guys' stuff and anything that I could pick up. So just always in the sport, always thinking about the sport. I'd read anything I could. So like back then it was a lot of Penlay and them, and now I read everything that my good friends put out. Everything Travis Mash puts out is excellent. And we have a lot of conversations discussing different methodologies and what's working for us. And I've been fortunate to develop a lot of friends in the sport, and we talk routinely about anything that's working, or like, hey, what do you think about this athlete? What can I do to get her glutes to fire at the top of the snatch, or whatever it is. And then just reading everything I can, even from stuff outside of weightlifting, anything that like Greg Knuckles puts out, and there's so much information you couldn't even digest it all. So it's like always reading something new.
Yeah, I'm curious because, you know, a lot of those resources, and I think I might have said this on another podcast, but like a lot of those resources are available to pretty much anyone who's interested. But not just anyone can take those resources and translate them into success. So what do you think has, you know, allowed you to kind of, and I know you're probably, you know, a modest guy, and but what has allowed you to become as successful as you have been, you know, and really be able to develop athletes, weightlifters, CrossFitters, because again, the books tell you what to do, but they don't, you know, necessarily do it for you. So what's really kind of been the key in translating that?
That's kind of a good question. I'm not sure. We take things pretty slowly. We have a very methodical approach. I have a whole list of progressions and regressions for almost all my exercises. I make sure that people can master one progression before they move on to the next one. Or if something's slipping or if we need to fix it, we have a whole bunch of regressions we come back down. So I think a big part of it is to make my athletes be disciplined and not moving beyond the level that they're ready for at the time. And just making sure it's perfect. I try to, especially with my youth athletes who are going to have a long career, like my goal for them when they're learning the movement is not just to know how to do it right, not to be able to do it wrong. I want that movement pattern so set that if they try to, like, it's like for me, even like if I try to show someone sometimes what they're doing wrong, I can't do it because it just doesn't, like the synapses just don't fire that way. So I think that's a big part of it. A huge part of my success with youth athletes is almost all my kids are gymnasts. So my wife coached gymnastics for a long time at the same place that I used to coach at. And so we have 16 kids who'll be competing at youth nationals, and I think 12 or 13 of them are gymnasts. And so just having that base, just the strength and the flexibility, but also the awareness and proprioception, as well as a lot of the mental stuff. Like those kids, their paradigm towards training is different than kids from other sports. I mean, most of those kids, they did a minimum of 20 hours a week training for gymnastics. And some of the ones who are trying to go onto the elite track were doing even more than that, up to maybe 30 hours a week. So if I get them in the gym and they're doing like 8 to 10 or 12 hours a week, their paradigm is different. Like those kids work hard, they're disciplined, they know how to take instructions. And I think my core group of gymnasts, like they feed the ethos in the gym. So everybody else, like that's just how we work out. I mean, like, it's just, it makes my job really easy.
Yeah. Have you had any problems taking, the younger athletes who are gymnasts, convincing either them or their parents that, hey, weightlifting and training with weights will be beneficial? Has there been any difficulty in kind of transferring the kids from gymnastics over to weightlifting and then back and forth?
I mean, yeah, I guess a little bit. So I still have kids who their main sport's gymnastics, and they come to me for strength training for gymnastics.
Mm-hmm.
Not usually snatch, clean, and jerk, but just getting stronger in general. Like, they can see it. I mean, usually 6 weeks or 2 months after they start, like, their vaults are higher, their tumbling is more explosive. They actually have like the requisite shoulder strength to maintain position on the bars. So at first, it might be a little tough. I mean, a lot of people, still have a misconception that lifting weights is somehow dangerous, but like doing a double off the bars is perfectly fine, So, so there's like a little bit of buy-in, but what I found is the kids who start working with me, they generally see big improvements in their gymnastics because they're actually doing some maximal strength work, and then their teammates see that they are improving, and so now we have a crew of like 6 gymnasts who come all together, and they are gymnasts. They're going to be collegiate gymnasts, but they work with me for strength conditioning. And for getting kids like from gymnastics, like just into the sport of weightlifting, like I was fortunate to have my platform in the back of the gymnastics center for 3 or 4 years. So those kids were always exposed to it, like where they would eat their snack for break, just facing the platform, and they just watch me work with the other kids. Like, oh, that kind of looks like fun. And just gymnastics is it's a hard sport because the requirements are so long. Like, you have to spend, like, if you want to be good, like, you have to spend a minimum of 20 hours a week. And so a lot of those kids feel like they don't have a life. Gymnastics, it's like you really do have to have a very certain body type to be able to make it far into the sport. So the kids like training, but they know by the time they're 13 or 14, like, whether they're going to be getting a scholarship to college or not. And so a lot of those kids just either got burned out or maybe weren't going to make it to the top level in gymnastics. And so I'm like, hey, why don't you just come over to the gym, let's just to the weightlifting center and see if you like this stuff. And most of them pick it up really quickly because they're already good at it and generally like it. And so I haven't had like too much resistance, really.
Yeah, I know that a lot of people listening probably understand that gymnastics is great for developing, future athletes, and that they'll develop kind of the body awareness, just kind of more general strength. But in the gymnastics world, is strength training widely accepted as a way to improve, their performance? Or are you kind of doing something a little different, exposing all of these kids to the barbell and squats and deadlifts and stuff like that?
Well, I mean, all gymnasts are doing a lot of strength training, but it's all body weight for the most part, in clubs. But also another selling point is, like, when the kids do go to college, they will be working with weights. That in the last 10 years. And I think most collegiate strength programs do work with like external weights. And so, all right, well, why don't you come with me to a small group? I can teach you how to do everything correctly, and then when we get to college, you're in a much better position. But yeah, I don't think most club gyms around the country do much of anything with weights. They might use like 2.5 or 5 pound weights for like PT work for their shoulders, but they're not squatting a heavy barbell.
Yeah, interesting. So kind of transitioning now to weightlifting and assuming we have someone who maybe was a gymnast and then, decided for some reason to come to you for weightlifting, what does that process of initiation look like in terms of, maybe we can dive into the teaching model, and then also what the program will look like initially, because they're already doing or have done a lot of like body weight work and moving in different planes, a lot of full body stuff. So I'm assuming, a lot of that teaching has maybe already been done on the back end. So what does it look like when you're getting a weightlifter who has a little bit of a background, but no exposure to the snatch and clean and jerk.
So really, it doesn't matter who's coming into the gym. The first day, I'm running them through just a basic assessment. It's like not like a SFMA or something like that, but I just want to see how they squat. I want to check out their pressing mechanics, check out their upper body pulling mechanics, see if they know how to hinge correctly, if they can rotate or at least do anti-rotation. And the first day, I'm just looking to see if they have any major deficiencies or asymmetries, either left or right, or like bad ratios front to back with their pressing strength or something like that. And then from there, I'll get them on a program. But gymnasts in particular have a lot of issues. Like most gymnasts have a severe anterior pelvic tilt because they have to do so much back bending. So I'm looking at that kind of thing and looking at what I'm going to need to correct to give them the right foundation. And it depends on what sports people are coming from. Like people just have things that are generally, there's something that's off. And the beginning program, like most people, I'm not having them snatch and clean and jerk the first 6 or 8 weeks. Like they're working on proper squat mechanics, making sure that they're, not arching their back excessively, that they can keep the weight balance on their feet correctly. So we have a full list of progressions for squats, and then for push-ups. Like even the gymnasts who think their push-ups be perfect, but a lot of times they're working groups of 30, and they don't know how to retract and depress their scapula for one thing, or they are still arching in a push-up. So we're working on lots of core work and just all the foundational stuff. And then once they've done few months of that, and they can do a perfect squat and they can control their scaps, their hips are back neutral under them, then we'll start working on progressions for the snatch and clean and jerk.
Yeah. Have you ended up, because I know you said Greg Everett's kind of like weightlifting Bible was a major resource for you. Have you changed the teaching progression much from that, or is it kind of like people who are interested can go check it out and that's similar to what you use?
No, I honestly don't remember exactly what his teaching progressions are, but I have a list of progressions that I've developed that works really well for me. So do you want to go over like what I would use for like match? Yeah, okay.
That'd be great.
All right, so first I'm going to check out if they can actually get the bar overhead and just see how low they can go into an overhead squat. Just checking out their basic mobility with that. As long as that looks good, we generally start with tall muscle snatches. So that's no leg bend. I want them glutes tight, standing tall, focus on keeping the elbows down, elbows up, and just working on that turnover. I tell them it's like they're snapping towel overhead, and sometimes they can put a towel in their hand so that they learn to snap. So we generally we'll do that alternating with the footwork drill, just going from the pulling position into the squat position. So it'll go just tall, just moving down into the catch position, and then going to the squat. Usually a couple rounds back and forth with that. I'll have them work next on a tall snatch so that they learn that they're pulling underneath the bar. I'm trying to basically conceptualize that the arms don't pull the bar up as much as pulling themselves under, which is not it's not 100% true. You're using, but anyway, it's basically trying to get that concept in their head that they're pulling under the bar. Once their tall snatch is looking good, they got the timing, footwork, and everything's correct. Once they get that, that's most of the hard part. And then from there, we'll just go into a hip snatch. They're just going direct power position, jump, catch, do sets of that. And generally, that's as far as I'll go the first day. Second day, when they come back to it, we'll go all through all those first drills, and then we'll start working on pulling from below the knee. So I'll have them go from below the knee into the power position, stand and shrug, below the knee, into the power position, snatch. Whenever I'm teaching beginners, I always emphasize that the positions are the most important thing. And the rhythm and then the timing are the next steps. But I'll generally have them go intentionally, try to take 5 seconds to go from below the knee into their power position. Once it's in the power position, then they can go fast. Because too many people, they don't know how to balance on their feet. They get pulled forward or they get pulled back. Big thing I'm seeing with people coming from CrossFit is they've probably done 5 deadlift reps for every snatch rep they've done. And so way too often people are going to go from below the knee and they're going to deadlift the bar into their hips. And then when the bar comes into the hips, their legs are straight and they don't understand why they're swinging the bar out and can't like actually use their quads to jump vertically. So we'll go real slow through those progressions from the knee to the hip and up, and then I'll have them just go like, all right, I just want this next one 5% faster. I want this next one 5% faster. When they're comfortable with that, then we just start taking it down towards the floor. So it's just the same basic progression. We usually go to a low hang, have them keep that back angle where it's at, work on just bending the knees and feeling that position. That's generally the hardest position to feel, is knowing from the knees down to the floor if you're keeping your back angle at angle. So we'll go real slow. We'll go like first pull into the hip, shrug. First pull into the hip, snatch. And so it's going really slowly, focusing firstly on the positions, and then start to work on the rhythm. When the rhythm and the positions are good, we can start adding a little speed, and then we'll start adding weight to the bar. And it's not like we're not doing PVC pipes. Like I need them to have enough weight to have that proprioception to be able to feel where the bar is in space. But it needs to be like the first couple months, they need to always be able to be successful. I generally want a weight where they have to think about it. They have to do the positions correctly to be able to hit it. Like you don't want just flipping up a PVC pipe. So that's not going to help. But I believe that weightlifting is a sport that you learn more from your successful attempts than you do from misses. And in the beginning, I just want those pathways to be so strong that it doesn't matter how much more weight they put on the bar, like their body's going to revert to that motor pattern. I don't want it to be all of a sudden they get heavy and they swing the weight out. They just need to get lots of reps that are perfect. And we just slowly start increasing the weight from there.
Yeah. And I'll pause for a second, let people grab a pad and pen. And if you wouldn't mind, because this is excellent. This is exactly what I was kind of hoping the podcast would be. Maybe we could go through the clean progression and then the jerk progression too, just to kind of highlight what you do there.
Sure. Yeah. The clean progression is very similar to the snatch. We do generally tall muscle snatches. Sometimes I personally think the clean is harder to teach than the snatch. People have issues with the turnover. So we'll do tall muscle cleans. We'll often, if they're having issues before going right into the tall clean, I'll have them do a scarecrow drill. So just hold the elbows high and practicing that turnover. But the progressions from there are really very similar to the snatch. It's not really anything too different. So you want to talk about the jerk maybe?
Yeah, let's do the jerk.
Okay. So the way that I teach the jerk is first I just work on getting them in the correct position first and getting really comfortable in that position. So the way that I work first and just teaching people to find their own positions is I'll just have them put their knee on the floor and get in a lunge position. I'm looking for the shoulder, hip, knee to be stacked completely vertically. I want a 90-degree angle with the front leg. So their front foot, like their front shin, straight vertical, or maybe a little bit beyond vertical. And from there, and then the feet are just going to be about the same distance as where they squat. Maybe in or out a little bit, but put them in that position, and from there they just stand up. I might have to correct it a little bit, but if they are already in that position when they stand, their shoulder, hip, knee are stacked vertically, their front shin is vertical, they should have equal weight distribution between their front and back foot, and then I'll usually push down on their shoulders and ask them if they feel strong there. And if not, we might make slight modifications, and then I'm drawing chalk around their feet so that they know, like, that's your position. When their knee was on the floor, I put a line of chalk going on either side of their knee so they know where that center line is. So from there, they're in their position, their feet are marked. I just have them start tall, and in the beginning, we just work on jumping and landing back in that exact same position. So we just call it just a jump and split drill. They're going up, and they're working on planting their feet. I'm looking to see that they are balanced, that they're not wobbling side to side, that they have some rigidity, so they're not hitting and sinking into their lift. And we'll generally do sets of 5 on their dominant leg. And then when I teach jerks, I make everybody do their non-dominant leg as well. Because for one thing, it's like I want people to stay balanced. And the youth athletes, like when they're beginning, they do both legs all the time. But also what I found is that the errors that you have on your good leg are just going to be like exacerbated on the bad leg. So if you can start fixing the errors on your non-dominant side, it generally translates and it carries over to your good side as well. So we'll start with just jumps in the split when they feel real comfortable with that. Then we'll move on to dropping into the split. So I'll have them start in the middle. They're not in their shoelace. It's going to be right over that line we drew on either side of their knee. That's going to be their center, where the center is. And we just do the same drill, just going from tall, just dropping straight down into the split, looking for the same rigidity, the same balance. We'll do both sides of that when they're comfortable there. Then we kind of go back to that first progression. They're going back into their split. So they're already starting the split. I'll usually do bar behind the neck, and I'll make them jerk in their split. So they're going straight up, catching, focusing on making sure the timing is synchronized between the hands and feet. And by doing that, by making them jump and land in the same position, ensures that their torso remains vertical. Because if your torso drops, that front foot is going to pull back, and the back foot is going to extend long, and they're not going to be in their position. So as long as they can start and end in the same position, I know that they're learning to dip and drive straight. So we'll do that on both sides when they feel comfortable there. Then, for the most part, they've got the jerk. We're going in next. We're just going similar to the second drill where they're dropping into the split, and we'll just put it behind the neck. I'll have them dip and pause. They're going to do a 3-second pause, making sure their chest is up, their glutes are squeezed, and they can feel the weight balance through the middle of their foot. And then they're going to just do a jerk. Pause, jerk behind the neck. And when I'm doing all these jerk drills, everybody has to be able to pause 3 seconds. They can't pause 3 seconds for all their reps. They can't go up. So from there, they pretty much, they're doing jerks, which is behind the neck with a pause. Next, we'll move into in front of the neck with a pause. Pause jerks. And I just put the pause in there, just make sure that they're balanced. From there, we'll usually go into an eccentric jerk. So they're taking 4 or 5 seconds down, which takes forever on a jerk. It seems really long. But that just ensures that they're balanced in the middle of their foot before they learn to change directions quickly. Do eccentrics for a little while, and then after that, then they're jerking. They pretty much got it.
Yeah, and this is obviously a great progression and very useful when you have newer athletes. When you get people who have either taught themselves or had other coaches who come to you with experience, how do you treat them with respect to correcting major technical errors? Is it some type of regression back to this to these drills or these ways of teaching the mechanics? How do you teach lifters who already have major problems ingrained?
Depends how major the issue is. If it's majorly wrong and I don't feel like the lifter's going to be able to progress with the technique that they have, I will regress them back to those drills. If it's something that is a little more minor, like maybe they just, when they catch, their front foot's short and their back foot comes long, then I'll usually give them some drills to teach them how to just how to feel what the correct movement is. So I'm a big fan of doing RNT type drills, which is reactive neuromuscular training. So one of my new favorites for someone who has they lean forward with their torso on the dips, and then of course they're always forward with their torso on the catch. Their weight distribution is uneven. We'll do an RNT exercise. I just made this up a month ago, but it's helped a bunch of people's jerks. I will connect a band to a pole behind them, and they're going to step into it, and the band is pulling on their hips, pulling their hips back, and then we'll do another band from the front going over their shoulders. And so that band is pulling their torso forward. And so we'll start with just dips. They learn to push forward with their hips, pull backwards with their shoulders. And then from there, they'll do the drop into split, the second progression that I teach people. So they're just dipping and just dropping into the split and learning how to push and pull. And what's crazy about that drill is, like, I don't really even have to tell them too much. They do that drill, and then they immediately walk from that drill into their jerks. And a big percentage of the time, their jerk is upright, like they've never had it before. They're probably going to miss the lift because they're not used to catching in that position, but they learn where the lift it, like where they should be. And by the end of the session, like, most people are markedly improved in their positioning. And it's just from teaching their body, like, what to do and fighting it, holding it for a while. And then when they come, their body's naturally going to do it. It's just like doing squats with the band around your knees, and then you remove the band and all of a sudden your knees are pushed out. So we'll do drills like that. I've got another one that's very similar. I'll do way too often I see people catching with their knees caved on the jerk. So like if they're jerking right foot forward, their right knee is coming in, their back leg, the left one's coming in, so they have no stability. And so I've been doing an RNT exercise with that as well. They're doing right leg forward. I'll attach a band to a rig from the left, pulling that right knee in, so they have to push out. And then I'll attach a band for the back foot on the right, pulling that left knee in, so they have to push out there. And it just teaches them to use their glutes. That's generally going to help people get their foot spacing wider. And just by doing and like holding that movement when they go into their next jerk, it's generally much improved. And so with someone who has those ingrained movement patterns, you can try to tell them and get them to conceptually understand what to do, but they've done so many thousands of reps, like you need a really potent stimulus right before they go to where they can naturally feel where it's supposed to be. And I'm a big fan of anything that I don't have to try to get the person to conceptually understand, where I can make them feel the correct position, and that always seems to help.
Yeah, that's actually, I think, a great explanation for how motor learning does and should usually occur is with, certain constraints within the environment, whether it's like a board in front of their feet so they can't jump forward, or some kind of band pulling them one way or another so they have to work to resist it. I actually, I do something similar where I'll just hold a PVC pipe in front of the sleeve of the bar. So if they drift forward in the dip, or they, let the bar roll off the floor, it hit the PVC pipe and give some physical feedback. Do you have any drills like that you use with the snatch or the clean, or just kind of with the jerk?
Probably more so with the jerk. For the snatch and the clean, I mean, one of the most common mistakes is people just getting pulled onto their toes and jumping forward. And I can tell the person 10 times what they need to do, but for some reason, if I just put a rubber mat 3 inches in front of their toes, it generally fixes the issue because they don't want to jump onto that mat. And so they learn to finish up. We'll do some drills too. People aren't moving their feet correctly. We'll put mats on either side so that they actually go up and exaggerate getting the feet out onto the mats. And it's an exaggeration. I wouldn't want their feet coming that high, but I do want them to finish their pull and get off their feet. Let's see what else. We also do, I'm a big fan of doing snatch pulls to a target, or generally snatch pulls. So what we'll do is I'll have the person stand perpendicular to the squat rack. We'll put a PVC pipe where the bar would go, like if they're squatting, attach it with a band. We'll put that at chest height, and then people need to really like finish the pull so they have that tactile feedback of the bar touching the PVC pipe. And I've seen really good results with that. I think that a big issue that for some reason a lot of American weightlifters have is they're so focused on speed that they don't get the bar into the hip and rise with the bar. It's snap and they pull under. But in my view, a snatch is a little longer pull than a clean should be. Bar needs to get into the hip. You need to rise with the bar. Snatch is all about height. And so that drill teaches people who might be really fast, like how to actually finish with the bar. Because I think that's a big issue that a lot of lifters have. It's something that I've had to work with. The clean, on the other hand, the clean can be a bit of a faster, snappier movement on top, especially when you're getting a little higher in weight because the hands are closer together. You snap the bar, you're actually getting oscillation on the barbell. same as a jerk, which a lot of people, I don't think they think about, or as they're coming into the sport and they're not lifting enough weight, they're not ever going to feel the oscillation. You're not going to feel oscillation until you're, I don't know, 150 or maybe on a men's bar, and maybe 105, 110 on a women's bar. But it's a snappy, fast movement to try to pop the bar, get that oscillation, and get under quickly.
Yeah, well, it's actually interesting you say that, because when I lifted in front of Max Ada and Yasha Fay and Dave Spitz in California, and the big thing with them is that when I finished, I kind of let the bar float away and just dive under, and the kind of their repeated message was stay with it, keep it close, and keep pulling just a little bit longer. And I agree completely. A lot of people just hit it with their hips, and you can see the bar start to float and they just drop under. So I'm always trying to find ways to cue or to get people to stay with it and to kind of squeeze it in and up a little bit more.
Yeah. Zach Talander had a really good video about that. I think he called it Up Like Lasha.
Yeah.
And it's just nice you can watch that video, because Lasha is so tall. He's so long. It's much more pronounced than like a shorter lifter. So you can see him get that bar into his hip, and he's rising with the bar the whole time before he pops under. Like that, it really finishes his pull. So it's just like, that might be a good visual cue for people to see kind of what we're talking about.
Yeah, and you mentioned with the clean that generally people have a problem with the turnover. I have a problem staying connected with the bar. A lot of people I know and people I see have a problem staying connected with it. How do you teach kind of that smooth turnover and that tight receive into a catch? Like, do you have any drills or exercises you like for that?
Yeah, I think most of the time when people have an issue staying connected to the bar, they're not getting their elbows high enough on the pull underneath the bar. So a few cues that I'll give people that generally help a lot are, one, keeping the knuckles pointed down, like you're punching down towards the floor. Because if the knuckles aren't down, if the knuckles come out, the elbows are going to come back. And that's a much longer distance that you have to move underneath the bar. So you can keep the knuckles pointed down, get the elbows like almost above your shoulders in that pull under, it's going to be a lot smoother on the catch. Also, if people have the flexibility, being able to hold your hook grip through your clean is a huge advantage. If you're releasing that bar, that's just one more thing that you have to time correctly. So if you can hold that hook grip, you're going to be able to keep it in much tighter. As far as drills, I will often have people do light tall cleans in between their sets, so that they can feel that timing, they can work on those cues we just talked about. And so doing like 3 tall cleans that are pretty lightweight, like maybe like 35-40% between sets, then that's in their brain, and then they just have to think about catching the bar just the same. And so I like that one. Trying to think what else. I know we've done other things. I've had people work on just to keep that bar close so it's not moving out. I'll attach light bar, generally just like maybe a 15 kilo bar for guys, loop bands on it, bands pulling back so that they can get the elbows up and feel keeping that bar close and turning it over. And all these drills, of course, they're only going to work if you have the requisite mobility. So right. I'm always going to be checking out their internal rotation through their shoulders. Because if they just if I pin their shoulder back and they have no internal rotation lying on the floor, like any of these drills, they're not going to help. So the best thing that we found to work on that mobility is going to be body tempering work. So we'll use this 60 kilo rolling pin, and I will just set it on their anterior deltoid, and then we'll generally do some type of PNF stretch for that internal rotation. And a lot of times, if we can add 20 degrees of internal rotation, their bar path is going to be much, much smoother. They'll be able to keep it close. If they're just fighting their body, it's not going to happen.
Yeah, that's really interesting. Now I'm curious to hear, because talking a lot about the teaching progressions and the way you teach movement, I mean, it's very similar to how I think about it and conceptualize it. when you write a program for someone who is an athlete you're coaching, do you tend to include a lot of variation that will kind of further reinforce these concepts, or are you kind of more of a purist and you kind of just stick to like snatch, clean, and jerk? Like, what's your take on programming, just kind of generally?
So it's a little bit of both. I mean, I think that doing variation should have a purpose to it. I don't think that, because a weightlifting movement, a snatch is so technical. You need lots of snatches from the floor. Like, you need to practice your competition lifts. But if you have a certain issue that can be addressed with, if your timing is off on your snatch, or you're slow pulling under the bar, then we might use hangs. Mm-hmm. If you're not able to find the right position, we might use blocks so that you can feel the correct starting position where you're having trouble and get those reps in. But most of my athletes are doing, like, once they're proficient with the lifts, they're doing snatches and clean and jerks from the floor pretty routinely, and that's going to make up a majority of their volume as long as they're technically pretty sound. The other lifts are more for fixing any issues that we have, and just to keep the training from getting stale. Mm-hmm. So, like, I think the fastest way to get strong is to lift heavy weights, but I'm not going to have someone be doing max snatches, max clean and jerks 12 weeks out from a competition. But I can have them go heavy on maybe a high block snatch, and they're going to do a 3-rep max one week, and then a 2-rep max the next week, a 1-rep max, deload, and then we'll move on to a new progression, just to keep the training from going stale. Because generally for some athletes it's 2 weeks, for some athletes it's 3. After that, they're going to start regressing. So I kind of picked that up. It's kind of like Louis Simmons' idea with left side barbell, how they're maxing out, but they're doing some different variation from going stale. But lately I've been having a lot of my athletes do like snatches on the minute, clean and jerks on the minute and a half at generally 75 to 85%. And that's a weight that they definitely should be able to be successful making them perfect. And those are almost always from the floor, just so they get lots of practice. With the EMOM or the minute and a half work, we can develop a lot of fatigue throughout the workout, but it comes on much more slowly. And so all the reps can all be done technically well. I've really kind of moved away from anything with higher reps on the snatch, clean and jerk. I mean, maybe real early in a cycle we'll be doing triples, or maybe it's a complex, but it's pretty rare to see someone do a triple snatch where the third snatch looks as good as the first and second one, especially with people who haven't been in the sport as long. And I just feel like with weightlifting, like, you need to get, like, I tell my athletes, every single rep you just got a little bit better or you got a little bit worse. And so if I'm programming something where one of their 3 reps is bad, well, then, like, one of their 3 reps, they just got worse on every single set. So I've been a really big fan of doing sets on the minute that build fatigue gradually throughout a workout, but they can still be successful. And yeah, maybe they're not getting as much height in their pull, but they're able to compensate because maybe they are learning how to be a little bit faster than their bar, something like that.
Yeah, that's a question I've always had, and I've always wondered, like, when you see kind of a traditional Russian style program, you'll see like 4s or something like that. And I just thought, if we could just split that up into singles and produce kind of why would it not produce a similar training effect? But I think the quality of each rep would be even that much better, especially for people who aren't quite as proficient and really struggle with the last few reps. Why not do 15 sets of 1 or 20 sets of 1 or something, instead of opting for 5 triples, which the last rep of every set's going to be ugly and tired. And, people talk about, then you feel the fatigue. So if you have to jerk, under that fatigue, it kind of recreates a heavy single. But I don't know. I've always thought of it, coming from the perspective that singles will produce higher quality movement, possibly a higher, pulled barbell and less horizontal movement. So why not just keep doing that? So I use a lot of clusters now, kind of a la Kyle Pierce and those guys, and on the minute work because of Glenn and Greg.
Yeah, we've been seeing really good success with that. And it's not like we're never doing more than one rep. I mean,
Right.
it's like a majority of the things we're doing are probably 2 or something, but if someone's doing a complex, it's to work on an issue.
Mm-hmm.
So maybe they have a hard time like navigating past the knee. So they might be doing 3 reps, but it might be a slow snatch pull, an eccentric down to the hang, a hang snatch, and then a snatch from the floor. So they're kind of doing 3 reps still, but each one has a purpose, and the idea is to be able to feel correct positions. And so their 3rd rep from the floor should hopefully be better than it was if they were just to do just a single.
Yeah.
We'll work on that sometimes, and it's trying to fix weaknesses. But yeah, found really good results with doing like that 75, 85% just from the floor, and usually by the end the reps are looking even better.
Yeah.
We've even been this last squat cycle for my youth athletes. I've been playing around with not even programming their sets and reps so much as, okay, we're doing 75%. This first week we're doing 24 reps, and I'll just kind of look at Preleptin's chart and say, I want you guys to try to make it somewhat easy on yourselves. I don't care how many reps per set you're even doing, but I want all 24 of these reps to be perfect positions. I want speed. Like I want to see how well you can do your sets, and we call it practice. Like we're practicing squats 75% this week. And so the kids, they're not going to want to do 12 sets, so they're doing 75%. They might be doing like 3 to 6, 3 to 8 reps, something like that. But every rep is perfect. And then when they get a rep where they're grinding or their hips push back, then the set's over, they rest and they do it again. And so by just manipulating volume, for the kids, generally I'm looking at Preleptin's chart, and they're going to start at what's considered optimal for Preleptin's chart and then move up to generally beyond what's considered maximal, because kids can handle so much volume. So they might do another like 15 or 20% beyond Preleptin's chart, and we'll have a day where like this month is 80%. We're doing 3 weeks of 80%, and we're increasing the volume week by week as long as you can recover from that volume. And we saw amazing results. I was just kind of playing around, testing it out. But everybody's squat mechanics got better. They didn't have any reps that were grinding, where their hips were pushing back or their knees were caving, because there's no excuse for it. They can just stop the set and then move on to the next one. And when I look at the number of reps that they're actually doing, it almost always falls within Preleptin's guidelines. And but then it's not quite so rigid, and that worked out really well. The kids are generally doing somewhere between 50 and 75% of their maximum number of reps at that weight. Does that make sense? So like it's at 80%, they could do 12 reps. Generally when they're doing their working sets, they're doing between like 6 and 9, which works out. I think those numbers are a little high, but you get the idea.
Yeah, it's a form of auto-regulation, and I think there's been some research coming out that's looked at kind of the amount of velocity loss per set. So if someone has a load and they're lifting it for however many reps, they stop at a certain percent of velocity loss. So if the velocity slows down by 10%, they stop the set, 20%, 40%. And they found that, with respect to strength development, you can stop when velocity slows like 10 to 20% and make greater gains than someone who does more volume and has a slower velocity per rep. And I think that's kind of the idea you're hitting on, is like when it really starts to slow down, those extra reps aren't super beneficial. And if anything, just cause more fatigue and make it harder to come back for the next set and the next set. So if you can find a workaround by having a volume prescription and then executing, I mean, why not, right?
Yeah, it works out well because they're able to handle more total volume without the fatigue that comes with it. And generally, I feel like volume is the main like recipe for growth. It's even more so than intensity. It's like that's the main variable that you can manipulate, is how much volume someone's doing. And if you're progressively increasing volume, as long as it's not total junk reps and you're working at a reasonable percentage, like you're generally going to get stronger from that.
Yeah. So I know that, you know, I think about how Sean Waxman programs, and maybe they snatch and clean and jerk twice per week. And I think about how Glenn used to program, and it was like 3 times per week. And what's your take on frequency with respect to the lifts? Because it sounds like you're a huge proponent of doing them to develop the skill of performing the movements. So do you tend to prescribe snatches, cleans, and jerks more often than not? Or is it just like proximity to a competition that kind of determines that?
I'd say generally farther out. I think the snatch needs the most practice because it is the most technical. So for snatch, they'll generally be one day where they're going heavy on some variation. We'll have a mid-range day where there might be their EMOM day. There might be a third day that's a complex where we're working on some positional strength, and that's kind of mid-range as well. And then generally we'll have a day that's very light, but focusing on speed or something. So maybe it's a tall snatch. Like I'd love tall snatches for getting under the bar. Maybe it's a very high block snatch, something that's going to really limit their intensity, but it's still challenging and they have to work hard. So I'd say generally for snatches, probably 4, almost always at least 3, but generally 4 if you're counting 60% work with tall snatches. I mean, something like that. Cleans and jerks are generally 3. There might be a power clean day, a clean and jerk day, and a clean complex day. Jerks are in there with the clean and jerks. We do quite a bit of overhead work, so it might not always be a jerk, but there's usually presses early in the cycle, leading into push presses, leading into push jerks. We do Saturdays are generally a lot of jerk focus work. My favorite drills is jerk drives, dips and drive, generally into a band, which works well. So like band accelerated jerk dips, and lots of jerk recoveries, as well as lots of overhead work for Turkish get-ups, windmills, that kind of things.
Yeah, with those jerk drives, is that kind of like a supra maximally loaded exercise? Are you putting on over 100%, 105, 110? Or is it like lighter weights but with more band tension to kind of keep that acceleration?
It's generally heavy to get people to learn to feel their positions and not freak out when they have a heavy weight. So one of my favorite progressions we'll do with that is it's kind of a triphasic training, something I got from Cal Dietz, because the jerk is the one movement in weightlifting that actually has stretch reflex. So we can really train that stretch reflex. We'll start generally the first block is going to be very slow eccentrics. So we're doing at least 100%, generally more, of a 4-second eccentric and then driving up into the jerk. And that is a very challenging movement. If I don't black out that session, I'll just come out of success, because most times I get really lightheaded. But that's a really good one to help feel positions, and also like really it's teaching you how not to black out. Too many times people catch a heavy clean and they're bearing down through their face, and there's too much like intracranial pressure, and that's why they black out. They have a vagal response. So that's been a really good one. Put heavy weight on, do a 4-second eccentric, learn to relax your face, try to press your tongue into the roof of your mouth, and keep relaxed and learn not to black out. And that's very helpful. And it's teaching you have to be strong through the entire movement. Where a jerk is usually so fast, you might not have the positional strength all the way through. So by going really slowly, you're developing that positional strength, you're still rebounding hard. And that's been one of my favorites. We'll generally do 4 weeks of that, leading into 4 weeks of an isometric hold in the bottom of that dip. And the weights can be heavy. I mean, I clean and jerk 170, and by the end of these cycles, I'm doing like 250.
Ooh.
And, yeah. But yeah, so the isometric, same deal, but this time we're going down, normal speed, hitting the bottom of the dip position, holding 4 seconds, and then driving. And it's crazy when you get done with the eccentric cycle, you get done with the isometric cycle. When you move into the concentric cycle, like now you've built that positional strength. You've developed strength in the end range position, and the bar is so snappy. Like after 8 weeks, most people are going to PR their jerk from that. And then during the concentric cycle, that's the first time we add the bands. The other ones are just straight weight. We add the bands with the concentric so that you have something that you're trying to accelerate against, and it also keeps the bar from popping off your shoulders, so you're not catching 125% of your clean on top of your shoulders every time. It just stays locked. But that's been one of my very favorite jerk progressions for the positional strength, for training that stretch reflex, and again, just not blacking out. It's one of my very favorites.
Yeah. Do you use many strength movements for like the snatch pull and the clean pull, or is it just kind of like the jerk dip? Because I know Glenn was a huge proponent of heavy snatch grip deadlifts and clean grip deadlifts. Do you see those movements as more like technical skills that are mastered, or do you tend to load those up as well, like pull variations?
I mean, I think that past maybe 110, 115% of your snatch, it probably has less utility. It's not going to have as much carryover. But if I have an athlete who cannot snatch deadlift 120%, well, yeah, we're working on, like she cannot do it. Yeah, we're working on snatch deadlifts because she's going to get pulled out of position on her snatch almost always. So it kind of depends on the athletes, how heavy we load it. Generally, farther away from competitions, more on like the max strength phase, we'll go a little bit heavier with the deadlifts. I love snatch deadlifts, and I think you should be able to snatch deadlift close to what you front squat. You should be able to clean pull pretty close to what you back squat. So especially if those numbers are way far off, then yeah, you need some maximal strength. So we'll do more deadlifts. Coming closer into competition, maybe 8 weeks out, we're doing more like 100 to 110% clean pulls, or snatch pulls. We're still working on that speed component, but we're getting something that's pretty heavy. And then as we get closer to a competition, that's when I'll start putting in like target pulls at chest height, or something that's closer to their competition weights, so that they're comfortable with that, so they can actually work on that speed component, so that their positions are perfect, they're getting everything dialed in, and every time they're doing a pull, they're like, all right, what is this going to feel to snatch? What is this going to feel to snatch? But so during that phase, it's generally like maybe 95 to 105% of their 1RM, just so that it's specific to the movement.
Yeah. And I think we've covered technique and programming really, really well. One kind of last follow-up would just be with the programming side of things. Are you how do you keep track of all of this information? Are you, counting reps or measuring some sort of like average intensity across time, or like, what's your take on the whole, like data collection side of things?
Yeah. So, I mean, I have done that stuff in the past quite a bit. Like I built a full spreadsheet where the athletes are recording every set and rep they're doing throughout a whole cycle. I had it broken down so I could see their total volume, their average relative intensity. We call it the K value, which is just your average working weight as a percentage of your competition total. So I geeked out. I got how much volume and what percentage your average was for pulls, what percentage of the total volume was pulls, squats, competition lifts, all this stuff. So I've collected the data, and I looked at the data, and sometimes it can be helpful if someone's stagnating. It might be worth doing. But personally, I've just found like humans are not, like we're not robots. You can't just put an input in versus an input out and often get really meaningful data. I will write that into my spreadsheet when I'm writing a general program and make sure that everything is in line. I want to make sure that the total volume for the workout should be in line, like above the minimum number of reps that are going to elicit some response, and generally not over, at least not too far over the maximum recoverable volume. And I'll use that when I write the program. But I think that's kind of where the art of coaching comes into it. Like coaching, it's all about programming a stress and then teach people to come back. It's all about manipulating stress. And so I'm looking at my athletes on a day-to-day basis, and we're adjusting things as we need. Someone comes in and it's like they take 10 minutes to get their shoes on, and I see them grab for the bar and they're just like loading the bar slowly. It's like, this is not working. We need to take it down, because most athletes are not full-time athletes. Most of the ones that I coach, most of them have jobs and families and different stresses that they're going through. So I'll use all that data when I develop the initial program, but then from there, like, you have to manipulate a little bit on a day-to-day basis, because stress is stress, whether it's coming from your heavy squat workout the day before or because your dog died last night. Like, stress is stress, and we just try to manipulate that kind of a day-to-day basis. And I'll often give people a range. So maybe we're like, all right, we're doing 70 to 80%. For you, you're in the middle of Preorder's chart, so I want probably 5 triples at 70 to 80%, or whatever it is. And then people can kind of adjust from there, and then we just look the next week and just try to progress, and then we deload and try to clear that fatigue. So some data collection I feel like can be useful. For like some of my top athletes making a world team, we'll use some of that stuff, but it's still like a day-to-day process.
Yeah. And speaking of, athletes who you're coaching who are kind of having a lot of success at the moment, is there anyone the people listening should look out for, or, check out on IG to kind of keep up with as they progress and gain more notoriety in weightlifting?
Yeah, we definitely have a lot of up and comers. For the youth team, I think we'll have definitely 2 and potentially 3 of the 10 spots for the youth team next year. And then I have a junior athlete who is killing it. She touched a barbell for the first time 2 years ago, and 2 years and a month ago, she touched a barbell for the first time. Her name's Megan Stry. She's 59 kilo lifter. She just snatched 90 off the blocks. And clean and jerk 107. So she did the online qualifier last month. She hit 84 and 107. So she's definitely someone to look out for, and she has a lot more in the tank for sure. She coming into that competition, her knees have been really bad, and we did not squat her over 75% for like 3 months because she had this competition coming up, and she had to focus on the snatch, clean and jerk. So I think she clean and jerked more than she'd been able to back squat without pain.
Wow.
We're definitely on the right track. I'm determined to get her knees healthy, and they're much better than they have been. I think that she back squats 145. I think we'll get her back up to 160 in a couple months. When she does 160 back squat, like looking at her history, I think she'll snatch. My goal for within the next 6 months, I want her to snatch 93 and clean and jerk 118.
Wow.
Her big goal is she wants to be the youngest American to clean and jerk double body weight. And I think she's got a really good shot at that. She's only 17.
Yeah. Do you know who was the youngest, or what the youngest age was to clean and jerk double body weight?
Yeah, that's one of my really good friends, Dane Miller, his girl, Haley Reichert.
Yeah.
She did it, I believe she was 19.
Okay.
So
wow.
Got a little bit of time. And Haley I think she was a 48 back then when she did it. She did 106 or 107, something like that.
Yeah. And for people who now kind of know the names and know the athletes that you're bringing up, if they want to follow the gym and follow you and keep up kind of with the content you're putting out, where can they go to keep up with Kevin and all things Alpha Barbell?
So the gym Instagram, it's Team Alpha Barbell. So we got we got a lot of our athletes on there. You'll see Megan, you'll see a bunch of my youth lifters. My little 12-year-old girl is crushing it. I think she'll be the youngest person to make a youth team. Like, I think she would have made the team this last year, but she wasn't eligible because she was too young.
Oh, wow.
Her name's Kendra, and she's very impressive as well. She's a 40-kilo lifter. She was back squatted 91, clean and squat jerked 65. She's snatching in the upper 40s. You'll see more of my youth kids that are. I have 2 kids actually who have been top 10 for the last 2 years, Katie and Noel, and but they're both 55, so they've been like 3rd and 4th on the list or something like that. So they haven't made a team because that class is so stacked. But I'm confident that they'll make it next year too. And just all my youth kids I'm just super proud of all of them. All my senior athletes are doing great. I'm proud of them too. So you can see all of them. It's just Team Alpha Barbell on Instagram.
Yeah, and we actually talked about a couple drills, and there were some ones we didn't mention, but you have videos up on the Instagram that kind of show, the RNT jerk drill and just with respect to squatting and hip movement out of the bottom. You guys have posts about that.
Yeah, I just posted that last week. We got a lot of good feedback, so I'm gonna try to I'll make at least 1 or 2 drills per week. I'll start posting on there stuff that I found beneficial that I haven't really seen anywhere else, but we've had a lot of success with. I'll put that on there too.
Yeah, awesome. And with you, Kevin, any projects in the works? Anything you're looking to do, or is it kind of more of the same, just chipping away at coaching and producing athletes?
Yeah, I mean, I'm very heavily involved with just coaching right now. We're working on building the gym, building the business up. We're coming off of it's 10 weeks. We had to shut down during quarantine. So we're just working on just building the gym, focusing on my athletes. I might try to compete in nationals in December myself. So
yeah. Are you still training?
It's been, I was all geared up for nationals when it was going to happen. And I think it was supposed to be May. Mm-hmm. And then we had the quarantine, and now our hours are so extended because we have to limit class sizes. So our gym is open from 6 a.m. to 8 p.m.
Wow.
I'm coaching sometimes 9, sometimes 11 hours a day. And then I have a bunch of remote athletes as well, training people all over the country. And so then I'm spending my time with that. So my own training is kind of taking a back seat, but a few months out now, I'm probably going to start pushing the weights again, see if I can hit some big numbers at nationals.
Yeah. What kind of shape were you in, preparing for May?
I don't generally go super heavy until competition day. Like I'll often go a full training cycle without missing. I don't like this, but I was able to hit the clean 130 snatch. I had a very slight press out on 135 for the qualifier. And then I hit a pretty smooth 170 on the clean. Nice. My squat strength was like all-time high. I was getting into, I did sets of doubles at 230 on the back squat instead of 210, or a set of 10 at 200. My squat strength was there. I just needed to peak, and now I'm kind of regressed. I've just been focused on the business and stuff. I haven't been training as hard as I should have. Just been kind of in maintenance mode lately. Yeah. The good thing, it doesn't take nearly as much to maintain as to build. So doing 50% and I'm maintaining okay.
Right. Well, I mean, that's all I have for you today. I mean, I don't know if there's anything I kind of missed that you'd want to cover or chat about, but I mean, this podcast was excellent.
Conversation.
Yeah, and for people listening, I'm sure we definitely piqued interest in kind of your methods of coaching and teaching. So if people are interested in maybe signing up for the online team, where can they find that information? Is it just through the Instagram, or do you have a website?
Our website's under construction, but if you just get to us on Instagram, we'll get right back to you in a couple hours. And we've had really good success with all of our remote athletes as well. So I love doing that too.
Cool. Awesome. Well, I appreciate the time, Kevin, as always. I mean, it was a pleasure having a chat with you. And for everyone who is listening to the show and really enjoyed it, feel free to share it around with your friends, your spouse, your family, whoever you feel would enjoy it as well. Thanks for tuning in, and we will catch you guys next time on another episode of the Weightlifting House podcast.